And it's a beautiful Friday morning right here in Lagos, Nigeria. Good morning, good evening, wherever in the world you're watching from. It's Business Morning live from Channels HQ. I'm Ladi Williams. Let's kick off your morning now. Take a look at how the markets are looking. Starting now with oil market, now we see prices rose today as fears of a U.S. recession eased, but we're on track for weekly declines of more than 4% after a jump in COVID cases. With China there, the biggest oil importer. So Brent there up about 23 cents to $93.80 a barrel, extending a 1.1% rise in the previous session. US WTI crude futures rose 28 cents to $86.75 a barrel after climbing 0.8% in the previous session. Oil prices picked up on Friday as the U.S. dollar fell after data showed inflation was weaker than expected, reining in expectations of rate hikes and boosting hopes of a soft landing for the world's largest economy. And moving on to the grains market now, we see Chicago wheat futures rose today, but were poised for their biggest weekly drop in 4 months as expectations of higher world supplies weighed on the market. Soybeans gained about 0.5%. While corn ticked higher. The most active wheat contract on the Chicago Board of Trade, WV1, rose about 0.3% to $8.05 for half a bushel. And soybeans, SV1, added about 0.8% to $14.34 for a quarter of a bushel. And corn, CV1, gained about 0.2% to $6.54 for three-quarter of a bushel. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, in its monthly supply-demand report this week, estimated world wheat stocks at 267.82 million tons, up slightly from its October outlook of 267.54 million tons. Analysts on average had been expecting a small decline to 266.52 million tons. And the federal government is again assuring Nigerians that the December 2022 date for the commencement of operations by Nigeria Air, the nation's new national carrier, remains sacrosanct. Speaking in Abuja while presenting the scorecard of the Ministry of Aviation under President Muhammadu Buhari, the Minister of Aviation, Mr. Hadi Sirika, explains that the stand of the federal government to own only 5% of Nigeria Air is in order to give room for efficiency and proper management. He adds that Nigeria Air will be starting off on a sound footing with $350 million funding by Ethiopian Air, Nigerian institutions, and the federal government as key investors. Take a listen.
The third edition of the President Muhammadu Buhari Administration Scorecard Series is featuring the Ministry of Aviation with key players in the industry present. Before the conversation moves to the Aviation Ministry, the Information Minister makes a quick announcement.
Let me say this. We are closely monitoring the evolving developments at Twitter. It has never been our intention to ban any social media platform or stifle free speech. Not at all. What happened in the case of Twitter is well known to all.
The Minister of Aviation delves into the crux of the matter at the presentation, highlighting the achievements recorded in the sector as he clears some regulatory issues, especially as regards the unauthorized use of drones.
We are a very well-regulated industry globally, and there's only one aviation. There's no aviation B. There's only one, universal. And it has to follow those standards. So there is a world regulating body for aviation, and there are many other bodies like ICAO, International Civil Aviation Organization, you have the Council, you have the PMO, and all of that.
Inevitably, the status of Nigeria Air, which is expected to commence operation next month, also featured prominently.
I've said this time and again, and I don't mind saying it many, many times. So 5% is for all of us, 250 million people. 5%. Because government has no business in business, and we can't run it. And it's true, and you know it also. Second, we say 46% of the airline will be by Nigerian institutional investors who are interested to buy. When you add the two together, you have 51%. 51%. And this 51% is on purpose and deliberate so that we have controlling shares.
Although controversies continue to trail the ownership structure of Nigeria Air, the federal government believes the arrangement with Ethiopian Air remains the best option for the country.
And now to our first conversation. It's election season, and Nigerian presidential aspirants have started releasing economic plans to woo voters for 2023 general elections. Here on Business Morning, we'll be drilling down on these plans to know the how. And for the first time in the series, we'll be looking at the Bola Ahmed Tinubu action plan called Renewed Hope 2023. Join us now is Ajuri Ngalale, Assistant Principal Spokesperson, Tinubu Presidential Campaign Organization. Join us from our Abuja studio. Great to have you on the program.
Good morning to you, my brother, and good morning to our esteemed viewers.
Good morning. So let's get to it now. Looking at the document, it says, our economy has been designed to be import-based, especially, importing finished products. So what is the plan to turn Nigeria into a more export-based economy, and exporting more finished goods instead of raw materials?
This is really a very critical component of His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu's plan for the future of the Nigerian economy, is how do we ensure now that our domestic manufacturers are encouraged to not only massively employ our urban youth, because we have a plan for urban youth employment as well as rural youth employment. I'll get into rural youth employment in a minute. But we recognize that the urban youth unemployment problem is a major one. And one of the ways in which we're going to address that, to your question, is by enhancing domestic manufacturing. Now, there's going to be a series of measures to ensure that we can do so. Number one, we are going to immediately we're going to lower import tariffs on semi-finished products and goods that our domestic manufacturers require in order to, be able to produce the items that Nigerians will be using from within the country. That's number one. Number two, is we're going to be providing tax incentives, tax rebates and credits to domestic manufacturers, for example, for hiring a certain percentage of their workforce from the unemployed urban youth population. Also, our focus is, like you mentioned, we're not looking just at raw materials. We're looking at how to, kind of transform our raw material base across the country into finished materials. And this goes into the industrialization plan. What we're going to be doing is we're going to create hubs, some local major and minor hubs within all of the 6 geopolitical zones that take advantage of the comparative advantages that each of the zones hold as it relates to the raw materials within their various jurisdictions. So, for example, in the Southwest, we're going to be taking advantage of the high quality sand deposits there to create a glass production industry that is large scale, that can employ many Nigerians and produce the products that up until now we've been importing in terms of glass products. And obviously that goes to housing, obviously with glass windows, that goes to automobile manufacturing with glass on the cars, et cetera, et cetera. It's a huge multiplying opportunity. Then in addition to that, we recognize that we have quality clay deposits, high quantity clay deposits in the Southwest that we can use to create a ceramics and dish making industry as well. So that's an opportunity in the Southwest. In the North Central, the hub is going to be centered around what the wealth we have in solid minerals. All sorts of various solid minerals. Nigerians are well familiar with what we have there in terms of iron ore deposits and many others that we can now refine, not just exploit, which is level 1 primarily, but on the secondary be able to refine and process that into finished jewelry, et cetera. That's going to be a major industrial opportunity in the North Central. In the Northeast and Northwest, obviously you have massive gold deposits in the Northwest, but we really want to focus in on textiles. We recognize that in the 1980s, the textile industry in this country was the second largest employer of labor after the federal government then. We want to ensure that we bring back textiles in a concerted, intentional way. That's part of the industrial plan for the Northwest and Northeast. And then in the South, South, and Southeast, we're going to be focusing like a laser on the production of the leather making industry in the Southeast, rubber production, and what we can do in terms of manufacturing tires, etc. But also majorly, it's going to be based on oil and gas logistics. Manufacturing drilling platforms, manufacturing pipe systems, manufacturing all of those multi-billion-dollar supplement parts that are required in the oil and gas industry, as against a situation where we've been importing these things from Japan and South Korea, paying out billions of dollars in the process. We believe that we can create national oil and gas parks in this country, which had even started already under President Muhammadu Buhari, that we can see that to a conclusion and expand on that. So we have a very clear and comprehensive plan of how we can take advantage of the comparative advantages resident within our zones to be able to take the focus off of raw materials exploitation and look at how we're going to process these things into foreign exchange earning commodities for international export. That's something that we're very excited about.
Quite a big plans, but I'm sure there are going to be funding, issues with all this. Because I saw on page 14 there, it says there will be a review of the federal budgetary methodology that's taking out, the benchmarks like oil price and exchange rate. First of all, why remove the benchmarks?
Thank you very much. So for us, it's very clear in our analysis that benchmarking we have to reform our federal budgeting process. And a major part of that is going to be delinking the federal budgeting process from the peg that we've always predicated our federal budgets on, which is the dollar value of the international oil price. We believe that instead of pegging it on that we should peg our federal budgeting on in anticipated government expenditure. Obviously, that is not some sort of license to endlessly spend, because we're also very clear within our manifesto. His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, especially as a professional accountant, clearly has stated that he's going to impose an inflationary spending ceiling to ensure that we do not excessively spend to the point where we would now worsen what is already a troubling global inflation problem. So that's important. What we don't want to do is we don't want to constrain domestic spending to the vagaries of some of the international, kind of variations that take place as it relates to, the fluctuation in energy prices and the like. We want to make sure that we empower the Naira to be able to get things done that the Naira can get done, and then use our foreign exchange on the things that are absolutely required to be expended on with foreign exchange. So that's the idea. We believe that in doing so, not only can we strengthen the Naira by making primary its function within our economy, but we also believe that that's going to provide the fiscal latitude and space to make the required investments we need to make in housing construction, manufacturing, agriculture development, and the like.
But taking out the oil benchmark, because when you set the oil benchmark there, you create space, for fluctuations. And when there's a price differential to the upside, you're able to remit some of that to the excess crude account. So what happens to the excess crude account?
Well, first of all, I think it's very clear to many Nigerians that we need greater scrutiny and even greater transparency around the functioning of the excess crude account. I think that that's a process that still requires formalization with the National Assembly. But moreover, that in no way, shape, or form undermines our ability to save and put away for when oil and gas kind of picks up and takes up its right of place within our economic space. Look, let's be clear about something. Within our plan, we make quite primary the development of the oil and gas sector. Even though we're focused on diversifying into manufacturing, housing, construction, in agriculture, in an even deeper way than what President Muhammadu Buhari had already achieved, we are also focused on ensuring that by 2027, that would be the end of the first term of His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, we would have raised oil production in the country from the current, if all is normal, once we deal with the crude oil theft, hopefully by the end of December, we'll get back to about 1.8 million barrels per day. We want to take that up from 1.8 to 2.6 million barrels per day, and then 4 million barrels per day by 2030. That's in the manifesto. So we are adamant about maximizing the revenue generation from the oil and gas sector, certainly, and there will be a mechanism for savings. As you well know, we've made significant investments in the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority. That is one vehicle through which we intend to continue to, really wisely invest our oil windfalls, but we really do need to formalize the operation of the excess crude account in a way that is clear to all Nigerians. Because as it is right now, we recognize that it has not been finite. The conclusion on some of those formal processes has not been met yet. But at the same time, we've tried to be open with Nigerians through the National Economic Council. Anytime that there's a removal of funds or an expenditure from that account, we've always told Nigerians, this is what we're spending on, this is how much, and this is where it's going. But we recognize that there's work to do with the National Assembly, and we're going to do it.
All right. You talk about boosting oil output to about 4 million barrels per day, and I know COP27 is on right now, and we're all making pledges out there about net zero. So how do you balance oil output and also moving away from dirtier fuels?
And this is a truly important question. So within our manifesto, we've really doubled down on President Muhammadu Buhari's position that we are a gas country. We're a gas nation. We're a nation that is much more endowed with gas resources than even the oil resources that we've long been relying on. And so it is part of the roadmap of His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu to see to a conclusion all of the major gas projects in the country. We recognize that this is a relatively clean fuel. This is something that has added very little to the global emissions problem. This has been recognized by almost everybody in the international community. So we're focused on those pipeline networks, the Ajaokuta to Kaduna to Kano gas pipeline that His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari has put in place and will be completed by the end of his administration. We're going to see to the completion of the Trans-Saharan Nigerian gas pipeline, which will now end at Kano, which will start at Kano, go through Niger all the way through the Sahara into the Algerian pipeline system to take Nigerian gas out of the Niger Delta into Western Europe, earning billions of dollars for the Nigerian economy in the process. And we're also going to see to the completion also of the extension of the new Nigeria-Morocco gas pipeline that's going to be going through the Atlantic Ocean all the way across several West African nations, all the way up into Spain. So you're going to have two major international export gas pipelines for really what is going to be the transformation of the Nigerian economy. But to your question about how to balance the global emissions issue with the kind of road to net zero with maximizing the revenue impact in the sector, it comes back to ensuring that we do the things we need to do in terms of eliminating gas flaring on our oil production sites, which is something that we're well on the way of doing. We've been able to cut down significantly on that over the course of the last 6-7 years. We're going to continue on that until it's done. I believe by 2025, we would have fully eliminated gas flaring on all of our oil production sites. It's even a component part of the Petroleum Industry Act, which Mr. President signed into law. So we're certainly on course there, but we want to ensure that while our oil and gas resources are viable in the international export market, that we take maximum advantage of it in order to use that capital to effectively diversify into our other major sectors as it relates to manufacturing, the industrial hubs with solid minerals production and refinement, and all of the other things I've mentioned around glass, ceramics, plastics, and so many other petrochemical industries that we're going to be offshooting into.
Before I let you go, unemployment rate now, 33%. What are the plans for jobs?
and this is fundamental. I mentioned the issue of urban youth employment through the incentivization of domestic industry and the disincentivization of imports. But on the other hand, when we talk about the rural youth, a major component is going to be our mass land clearing exercise. His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu has committed to Nigerians in this manifesto that by the end of his first term in office in 2027, he would have taken the current percentage of arable land in this country under cultivation that basically we're producing, agricultural produce on. Of 35% of all arable land today is under cultivation. He's going to take that to 65% by 2027. That's going to involve millions of rural youth being employed to massively clear lands across the country to create new bread baskets. That's number one. That's going to obviously increase the population of employed. It's going to increase the population of those with bank accounts, and it's going to increase the population of those paying taxes to the federal government and state governments. In addition to that, and this is very fundamental, is we're establishing a new consumer credit system in this country. This is historic. What it involves effectively is a situation where we know Nigerians are being forced to come up with 1 year's rent in advance. They're forced to come up with the full house payment for a house in advance, full car payment for a car in advance. These things incentivize corruption. We recognize that we can proactively deal with corruption if we can create a consumer credit system that would enable Nigerians to, within their legitimate earnings, afford mortgage payments on a house, afford lease-to-own payments on a car, and afford large-scale domestic appliances like freezers and fridges. Now, how we're going to do that, and this is very critical, there's a how to this. We're not just making pie-in-the-sky promises. How this is going to work is, first of all, we are going to, through the Central Bank of Nigeria, create an incentive program with the domestic money banks in the country to ensure that they are providing a bulk quantum of all of their lending to the real sector, to the low-income Nigerian consumer and to the middle-income Nigerian consumer, those on a monthly salary of 100,000 naira, 500,000 naira a month, to ensure that they're lending to them. Now, how this is going to work is at the first level in housing, we're going to work with the National Assembly to reform the Land Use Act to standardize all of the timelines and processes around land acquisition, obtaining your C of O from the state governments and all of that, so that developers will have equal time frames and equal process no matter where they're accessing land in the country. The second level is we're going to give tax credits and rebates to developers in the country to devote their developments to social housing for poor and middle-income Nigerians. And then, of course, we're incentivizing the banks to lend, mortgage lending to the Nigerian consumer to affordably pay for mortgages.
All right, so much to unpack
sorry about that.
So much to unpack there, but we've run out of time. There's so much you had to say there, and obviously we'll be looking forward to all of these plans, and hopefully these plans, are stuck to. Thank you so much. That was Adri Ngalale, Assistant Principal Spokesperson, Tinubu Presidential Campaign Organization. Thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so after the break, we shift focus now to COP27, analyzing pledges in energy transition funding. That's our next conversation. Just stay with us. Welcome back now to our next conversation. COP27, the 2022 United Nations Climate Change Conference, began Sunday, 6th of November, running all the way till Friday, 18th of November in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. Top on the agenda is reducing emissions, dealing with climate change, support and funding for poorer countries. Let's talk to David Arinze now, renewable energy expert. Join us from Abuja studio. Great to have you on the program.
Having me. Good morning.
Morning. So COP26 was the conference before this. How has the Ukraine war, inflation, impacted, transition plans from COP26?
Thank you for the question. The Ukrainian war has set the world backwards in several ways. We have seen significant shortages in energy supplies. We have also seen that prices of fuels have increased. We have seen increasing security issues. We have seen funds that would have been used, to fund developing countries, to fund other energy transition initiatives, are now being used to fund war, and resolving the war. So there have been several setbacks as a result of the Ukrainian and Russian war.
And we've seen appeals, to developed nations to provide more funding for projects that would enable the most vulnerable persons in the society adapt. How are developed nations responding to this at COP27?
It's quite exciting to see the kind of responses that we are getting amidst that we are seeing at COP27 amidst the various challenges, that are affecting the economic landscape across the globe. One of them, I would say, is the Africa Carbon Markets Initiative that was launched, which of course has myriads of benefits, in financial funding mechanism, in order to ensure that we can have a just and inclusive transition. We have also seen, even for Nigeria, that the UK government has pledged to provide an additional 95 billion a million pounds to fund resilient agriculture. So we can see that we're getting some great great contributions, great pledges from developing countries. We're beginning to see that relevant actions are being taken by developed nations towards developing countries such as ours, Nigeria. But is it enough? I wouldn't say that we are. COP is still on, and a number of pledges are still going to come on board. A number of initiatives are still going to be launched. Energy Day is next week, and so we should expect a few more announcements.
But getting those pledges is one thing. But what for you is the appropriate mechanism to make sure the vulnerable in poorer countries actually get this support?
One thing is very critical. Like you rightly said, it's one thing to make pledges, but are these pledges translating to actual transfers or translating into actual impact? I would say that in COP26 we had several pledges, but where are the world leaders and where are the developed nations? If you look at the pledges, over $100 billion, was pledged, to help solve this crisis, to help to fund developing nations. How much of that amount have literally trickled down into actual transactions or actual inflows? So, like you rightly said, it's one thing for us to see the pledges, but we need these pledges to translate to tangible, sustainable projects, which can, of course, lead to the improved livelihoods, of areas that are vastly impacted by these climate issues.
Right now, we know poorer countries are dealing with rising debt, and debt servicing costs. How can these countries be protected from taking on more debt, in this transition process?
We have to spend as developing nations. We have to finance relevant projects. However, in response to this question, I don't want us as African countries or developing nations to play the victim of how, because we need money to improve, but our African leaders now need to think inwards. What do we need to do with this funding that we're receiving? What are our priorities? And what have we identified as our priorities, and what do we need to fund? We need to see that all this funding that is coming in should be used as catalytic funding to unlock new markets, to serve as a platform that can bring in more direct foreign investment. And if we do not look at it from that perspective, we'll be doing ourselves a lot of disservice. We'll not be taking the best decisions for our nation. So this funding, however, that we're expecting, this sort of, we need more monies, because bearing in mind that we have the economic issues across the globe as a result of the Ukrainian war. Don't forget, in 2020, we also have a global pandemic. The world is recovering from this. Africa is recovering from this. And so there would be a lot of shortfalls, a lot of economic turmoil in a sense. But we need to set our priorities straight. What are we spending the monies that we are asking for? And what are the mechanisms that we have set in place in order to ensure that these monies that we are spending are one that can yield us much more returns that we can use to, first of all, clear our debts and also improve our economies.
All right, the,
Thank
the,
you.
the World Trade Organization launched a report on how, adopting international trade policies into national climate plans, can improve the global efforts to address, climate change. What's your view on this report?
I would say a big kudos to the World Trade Organization for that report. It indeed puts a spotlight on the benefits, or the what we can call the advantages of the current war that we currently see in Ukraine and between Ukraine and Russia. Because now that gas and energy supplies are being rediverted from Ukraine, from Russia, all European countries are looking at other alternatives, and of course, renewable energy is on the front burner. Other countries are looking at how can we ensure that we accelerate the use of renewable energy. We're beginning to see significant increase, and patronage for the renewable energy sector, and this provides a very huge opportunity, especially for us in Africa. And why do I say this? Because it is also a sector. There's a huge demand for it, and of course, when there is a huge demand, it means that it provides an opportunity for economic activities to take place. But for us, if you look across the African continent today, we are not taking advantage of this. What are the platforms that we are setting in place? What policies are we setting in place to ensure that we set up more businesses? Because we look at the infrastructure, whether we're going solar, or whether we're going wind, or whatever renewable energy technology we may want to go with. All of these are relevant sectors and businesses that can be set up, which can, of course, unlock loads and loads of investment. So that report kind of puts to the spotlight that it's a trade that would happen. Several trades will happen across different parts of the world, and we just can take advantage of it. Another interesting thing that this report put to bear is the fact that millions of jobs are estimated to be created via renewable energy sources, and so fantastic report. I would say that I would say that that report communicates a lot of directions that we can begin to take. We would definitely need to encourage more intergovernmental trade, interregional trade, and also ensure that we do not just look at the gloom of the crisis, but the benefits that come with it as well. Thank you.
Yeah, and I saw reports yesterday that some of the participants there were arriving in private jets, and some climate activists were protesting, that why would they, come in private jets? How did you see that?
People, for different reasons, would commute to setting a global engagement in the best way that fits, first of all, their schedules, that fits their security arrangements, as well as other factors, can make one jump on a private jet. And so one thing is critical. What is the purpose of arriving in Sharm el-Sheikh for this engagement? We should look at the overarching benefits. Of course, there are implications on the on our climate when it comes to the emissions that would be recorded. Thousands, of aircraft trips are happening simultaneously, to convey people in and out of Sharm el-Sheikh for COP. It happened in Glasgow. It will continue to happen in global events. But what is more important is the actions that we are taking after such meetings, is the kind of decisions, the kind of initiatives that are coming on board. So while we have that as an issue to deal with, but let us look at it as a lesser evil to deal with compared to the kind of decisions, life-changing, transforming decisions that need to be made at platforms such as COP.
All right. Well, what are you expecting after COP27?
Government should put a lot of more action behind those pledges. It is just one thing to pledge, but it's another thing to translate those words into meaningful projects, tangible action. We want to see much more boots on the ground. We want to see much more funding being mobilized. We want to see that it's not just mobilized funding, but we need to ensure that this funding translates into actionable projects that improve the lives and livelihoods of people. I mean, if you look across the country today, even in Nigeria, we had several states being flooded, livelihoods being lost, properties being lost. How do those people bounce back? How do those people come back? And this is not just peculiar to Nigeria alone. It happened in Pakistan. It happened in other countries across the globe. So these are challenges that need to be addressed. You know, these are certain people need support, and we need to ensure that while countries are pledging, governments are pledging, also the media needs and journalists across the globe, activists across the globe need to hold those governments accountable. They have to be, we not just pledge, but what are we pledging for? The funds that are being pledged and the transactions that are coming in, what are we using these proceeds for? And what are these proceeds translating into? Is it translating to improved lives and livelihoods? And if it is, who is monitoring it? Who is evaluating to see that these actions that we are taking is actually taking us to the destination that we need to get to? And if it is not, what do we need to do differently? You know, so for me, not just pledge, it's great to hear those words, but government leaders, leaders across the globe, African leaders should not turn COP to just a talk shop, but we need to see more tangible actions being taken place right there from Sharm el-Sheikh and even going forward.
Fantastic. Well, we'll keep tracking all those pledges and the actions that come with the pledges. Thank you so much. That was David Arinze, renewable energy expert. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so after the break, we head on to the market. We'll have Will giving us the details. To stay with us. Welcome back. Now let's head to the market. We have Will Ibong with the details. Will, how's it looking?
Good morning, Laddie.
Morning.
Yeah, it's looking cheaper this morning.
Cheaper?
Well, yeah, cheaper.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the word. I think I have to be cheaper this morning because someone has to, you know, give the market the energy they need. I think I just want to bring that in.
All right.
And yesterday we saw, I think the equities market did bring that, you know, that vibe yesterday. So I'm kind of like having that energy, that boost. Like I took that look as a like energy boost.
Right.
Yeah, that's what
so
I did.
So it's basking in the green.
Yes, I'm basking. But we're going to just jump into the fixed income market and see how that traded first, and then we're going to move in to see how the equities are faring. But equities did fantastic yesterday. But the bond market opened with a slight demand on the short end of the curve. We saw just minimal beats here and there, but we saw at the long end of the curve, a lot of demand was there as well. We saw 3.4 billion traded in value yesterday. We also saw average yields remaining stable across the curve. Now, we look at the Treasury bills market. We saw that also traded on a quiet note yesterday, as in participants remain cautious still. That's the word on the street of the bond space. However, we observed across the long end of the curve, interests were skewed towards the newly issued one-year bill. But that's talking about the NTB auctions that happened on Wednesday. But Chuka Nwachukwu, group head fixed income trading at UBA, is going to give us a breakdown of what happened at the NTB auction and what to expect from the markets. Good morning, Chuka.
Good morning, Will.
Well, Chuka, we're just going to bounce off and continue with what happened in Wednesday's Treasury bills auction. Can you tell us what happened there, what to expect, and why we saw what we saw? That's the drop on the long end of the curve.
Okay, thank you very much. It was an interesting auction. We saw well over 193 billion was on offer, and then 310 was sold. That's about 160 basis. 150% move upward, oversold. You know, if I might use the word. Interestingly, we also saw a drop in the rate. We saw the rate drop about 51 basis points from 14.5. It came out to 13.99. So this, for me, is as a result of the liquidity and then of the liquidity to invest in T-bills, and that's what we saw the drop in yield.
So looking at the drop in yields, and let's talk about that a bit, analysts expect some form of bearish sentiment. So you're saying we're going to be seeing yields trend upward due to the anticipated low liquidity from the system, the system. That's because of the NTB auction, the debit in the NTB auction, and the FX retail auction that is going to take place today. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think what we've seen, the drop in yield we saw, like I said earlier, has to do with the liquidity in the system. Going into the rest of the month, the only liquidity we will see will probably factor at the end of the month. The other form of liquidity that we usually have is we have just about 2 billion of coupon payments. So after this week, we expect to see a tightening in the system where we don't expect to see much liquidity. And so that will then now bring in the bearish sentiment you talked about, and then we can now see the upward movement in yield. Other than that, we see that what we have just seen, what we just experienced this week is just temporary because of the liquidity we had in the system.
So what are our expectations for the bond auction? We saw that not much happened for the other segments, the OMO and the CBN special bills. What's lagging there? Why did we not see a lot of action for those segments?
Yeah, well, generally the market has been quiet, because of the uncertainty in the system. Though we saw a little bit of activity on the special bill, and then of course the longer end of the curve, the 1 year bill you mentioned, but those were just minimal activity. Now, let me quickly go through the bond auction like you mentioned. So Monday there will be bond auction where we have about 225 billion will be on offer. The last stock rate came out, the longer end, which is the 2037, came out at 16%, and this bond is currently 1595, 1605. So we expect to see around about say 20-25 basis point movement, in that in the yield on that bond. Other than the liquidity constraint that we will experience towards the end of the month, we continue to see that the yield will continue to move up. And then, of course, bearing next week, we see inflation figures, and I'm sure that will also affect whatever happens in the fixed income market as well.
Speaking of inflation, we do know, I don't know, some people are expecting it to go higher than what we are currently at right now. So what do you think, what are your expectations for that, the numbers coming in? And how much of an impact do you think it will have on yields in the fixed income space?
Yeah, the last inflation figure came out at 20.77. We expect that this next one should be around 21.1, 21.34 levels. The reason being that all the parameters that have been, influencing the movements of inflation figure are still there. Even if not getting worse, we notice the flooding, which will obviously affect food production, and then of course food distribution, and then of course the FX issue, which is also another major concern. And so we expect that this will fuel in the inflation figures, and then it will further go up. How will the fixed income market? Because now investors with demand for higher yield, and that will also play into our market as well.
Thanks so much, Chuka Nwachukwu, Group Head, Fixed Income Trading at UBA, for sharing your thoughts and expectations, especially for the inflation numbers that we're expecting. We hope it's not going to be hotter than expected, maybe a bit medium to rare. Thanks so much, Chuka, for coming on the program. And now
Thank you
we
very
end
much.
with the equities markets where we saw very strong sentiments, bullish sentiments, 1.07% up. That's three-digit growth. That's three-digit, a hike in that rate. I mean, that's a number yesterday, but still at the 43,000 level, and the equity cap, not much movement, is still at the 23 trillion naira mark. We're hoping that today's trading session will move that, take it higher, maybe more sentiments, more bullish sentiments, the bullish momentum will, kick in, and then we'll see, hopefully, I'm keeping my fingers crossed there for that. Yeah, I am doing that quickly.
For the week. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, so we see other markets now. See Bitcoin there, price declined heavily below the 18,000 support zone. FTX still hounding, that market now. Talking about the Binance FTX issue. If we look at the heat map this morning, we'll see improvement with the heat map. There's green. Yesterday was all deep red, but today we're seeing some deep green and some green in this market today. All reactions to the US CPI that came out yesterday. We see the crypto market shrugged off what was going on with FTX and Binance, and we saw investors there buying up, some of that pullback we saw yesterday. Let's see the market sentiment. Market sentiment about 22 points for extreme fear. Talking about the sentiment, the fear greed index this morning. Market cap now $867 billion, still some distance away from the $1 trillion mark. It's up 3.93%. Bitcoin dominance 38.19. Trading volume, 24-hour trading volume down about 27.22%. Let's look at the price of Bitcoin now, $17,233. It did fall as low as $15,500, and we saw that big bounce come. Also, as we saw with the U.S. equities there, once we got that CPI data in the U.S., not as hot as most people expected there. We saw that jump. Volume traded $75.04 billion this morning. Big volume, buying pressure on the market. Let's look at Ethereum there. Ethereum, $1,255, up 6.40%. We're seeing holding that 1,000 level quite strong. Let's bring in Bjorn Martins now, blockchain expert, joining us. It's been a while, Bjorn. Welcome.
Good morning, Ladi. Good to be here again.
Great to have you. So we see the drama between FTX and Binance there still weighing on this market. We did see Bank Friedman talk about actually apologizing, on Twitter for and admitting that he tapped into user funds on the exchange. What do you think is going to happen to him next?
Yeah, this is a good question. He's going to have to explain himself to the regulatory system. He has not done something, unknown, honestly, as, for example, the normal banking system only backs up roughly around 1 to 3% of their loans out to the people. People having money stored there, the bank can use your money. So it's a same story. And what we experienced at the moment was a bank run caused by his competitor CZ, the owner of Binance, and that this made it happen that a lot of people instantly want to withdraw all their money from FTX, and it was much more than they had liquid assets to work on. Luckily, he's talking with people as Justin Sun, creator of Tron Network, Kraken Exchange, to bring back liquidity and see what they can do. But until now, it's looking really bad for the people that have still funds on FTX, as they have basically nothing left.
All right. Well, we saw the market react negatively to the report about FTX being insolvent, but now we have a green market. So that you think the storm is gradually coming to an end with the Binance FTX issue?
Yes, I'm pretty sure the fear has been sold. So people have been fearful enough. They have been selling their bags basically by being manipulated by the current market. Some people have made a good decision by doing that, as the market has really dumped much more than most people expected. As FTX had to liquidate a lot of their assets they were holding, including Solana, for example, took a dump of more than 50% over 7 days. But at the moment, it's been bottoming out, as you can see on the technical analysis as well. We are far at the end of the bear market. We are really getting to a bottom. So if you are a long-term investor, these are great moments to accumulate, get a good position in the market. You always wanted before that you couldn't get. Opportunities are there at the moment. We are really getting to a bottom, in my opinion. And yeah, give them a few months, and I think we won't see this number anymore.
Right. All investors are searching for the bottom in most of this market. Thank you so much. That was Bjorn Martins, a blockchain expert. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, let's look at the top alts by market cap. See what's happening there. We see it's all green this morning with BNB there, one of the tokens in the saga there, up about 5.28%. They get a big jump, but it's still a very volatile market we have right here. Let's look at the top 5 gainers there. We see FTT there, topping that counter there. That's the token for the FTX exchange. This one's been hammered. You know, with all that news about insolvency, it's trading at $3.19, but it did get that jump with the market. Wonder if investors are finding it attractive, you know, at this time. Chile's token up 25%. We see Matic there. Did start that bullish run. It's up 14.96%. Flip over to the top losers counter there. We see who's topping the losers counter. Let's see that. All right, we don't have the losers counter. Okay, so still there we see Leader Dow in the top 5 gainers list there. And well, that's it for the markets. Don't forget to join us by 1:30 on Business Incorporated for more updates and developments in the world of business. And remember, you can watch this again on our YouTube channel. Just flip over to YouTube, search for Channels Television. You can see all our other productions. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Ladi Williams. Enjoy the weekend.